So, your model's all painted. But what about sealing it? Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, time for another back to basics for you, and in this one I'm going to cover sealing your miniatures or varnishing your miniatures. So once you've done your painting, you need to basically seal the model so that the paint doesn't rub off. Not necessary if you're just using it for a display piece, but certainly if you're handling your models to play games, it's well worth sealing them. Now, as always, this video is aimed for beginners, so I really hope it's useful to you. So let's have a look at sealing our miniatures. Right, okay, so let's have a look at sealing our miniatures. So first of all, why would you seal your miniatures? Why would you varnish them? Well, the number one reason really is to basically protect the paint work that you've done. So what can happen when you touch your models, the oils in your fingers can make the paint rub off. And also if your models sort of rub together, maybe on the battlefield, that can make the paint chip off or rub off or scratch. And indeed, if your models obviously fall over on the battlefield, maybe say off of a ruined building, it basically protects the paintwork. It doesn't make them totally protected. There's still a chance of damage, especially with a metal model, but it definitely helps protect them. So it's always a good idea to varnish your models, to seal your models, unless it's just for display purposes. If you're going into a painting competition, for example, you probably don't want to seal your model. But certainly if you're gaming with your models, you want to seal them. So let's put my Space Marine aside and have a chat about different aspects of sealing your miniatures. Right, so first of all, I want to talk about painting on varnish to seal your models. So in front of you, you've got the Vallejo gloss and matte varnish. Now there is another type of varnish which is called satin. So just quickly explain the difference between those three. So matte varnish, which is the most popular one, once you spray that on, it goes very dull and it actually looks almost like your miniature has no varnish on at all, and that is the most popular one. Gloss varnish is quite useful for certain things. It can be very useful for painting things like gemstones, for example, something that you want to make shiny, or glass or water, something like that. Now satin sits in between the two. And I've used all three different varnishes, to be fair. On the actual models themselves, I generally use matte, except for my Eldar, which I use satin, give quite a nice shiny finish. Gloss is very shiny, so I don't put that on my actual models, but I do use it sometimes if I'm doing sort of special effects, like I said, maybe the gun sights of guns, where you've got the little eyeglass, etc. So it can be quite useful to have a gloss varnish as well. So like I said, we're going to talk about painting on your varnish first. Now this is very useful when you've got a small area that you want to have one particular varnish maybe different from the rest. So for example, yes, if you're painting a gemstone in a gloss finish, but the rest of the model is going to be matte, then we could spray our model with matte varnish, which we're going to talk about in a second, and once that's dry we can then go in and we can do the gloss varnish of the gemstone itself. So having varnishes which are in this little bottle form that you can paint on can be very useful. Now some people do actually varnish their whole army with paint on varnishes. I prefer not to. I do prefer to spray them. I find that when you paint them on, the varnishes tend to be just a little bit thicker and they don't give such a nice finish. Now there are some things where you have no choice, you have to paint on the varnish, and I'm going to bring in a model in now for you. So this is my Eldar Warwalker, which I varnished with satin, and then I went in and I painted on the satin using that little Vallejo varnish of this section here, the canopy, because that is obviously plastic. So I didn't actually glue that onto the model. I left that off, sprayed the whole model, and then I varnished the little canopy joins here separately with a paintbrush, and then once that was dry, I then glued the canopy into the model. And those are, you know, type of situations you may find yourself getting into where you can't literally just do a blanket spray paint. You may have to go in with a brush and manually varnish stuff. Okay, so that's talking about brush work. Now let's have a look at varnishing your models with a spray can or rattle can. So before you use a rattle can to varnish your models, there is one important thing, of course, and that is to wear a face mask and make sure, just like in the priming video, that protects your breathing in. You don't want to breathe in any of the varnish if you can help it. Now, I've had a lot of experience of spraying models with rattle cans over the years, and I've got a fantastic piece of advice for you, the best piece of advice that I can give. Pay money for a varnish. Don't scrimp out on a varnish. Over the years, I've tried various different types of varnishes, and although yes, sometimes you can get good results from a cheap varnish, sometimes you get very bad results, and the last thing you want is to have bad results on a model that you just spent hours and hours painting. So what can happen is you sometimes can get like a milky residue. Now that could be for various reasons. Could be because you haven't shaken it enough. Could be that the can's too cold. Could be the weather's too cold. The temperature's not right. Could be the distance that you're spraying the model from. So number one thing will be read the instructions of the rattle can. Find out the distance that you've got to be. Make sure you give it a good old shake. And as same as in the primer video that we did, put that rattle can, or at least half of the bottom half of the rattle can, in some warm water to heat up what's inside as well, especially if it is a fairly cold day. Once you have all of those things done, you've got a better chance of getting a good varnish coat without anything going wrong. But you will 100% make the life a lot easier if you spend money on a good varnish. And I'm going to show you what varnishes I use, and these varnishes are absolutely awesome. I've never had a problem with these varnishes. And I went on to these varnishes because the varnish that I was using, which I got from like a local art and crafts shop, the varnish was working really nicely actually. You know, it was spraying nicely, but what I was finding is after a number of years the varnish was going brown, and that wasn't good, especially when I had some white painting. I was ending up with brown painting. So I changed basically, and now I invest my money, and this is what I use. I use these Winsor & Newton professional varnish. Now I say they're expensive, they're not particularly expensive. I believe these are about 12 or 13 pounds per can. And they're fairly big cans, they do last quite a long time. But these are absolutely awesome. As I said, I've never had any issues at all with these, regardless of the weather. Obviously, if it's not rain, you know, if it's raining, of course, you don't want to spray the models in the rain. But if it's a bit cold, you know, a bit damp, or whether it's like hot and sunny, whatever the weather conditions, I've never had an issue with this varnish. So that's my biggest tip really, is spend money, get a good varnish. And if you can find this Winsor & Newton professional varnish, I do 100% recommend it. It is absolutely fantastic. Okay, so now you saw my model, which we are going to varnish in today's video. And as you can see, I haven't actually built it all. Now that's because A, all the weapon options are magnetised, but also B, I haven't put them on the base because there's some things that you have to do after you've varnished rather than before. And there's two things. One is if you're planning on putting static grass down on the base of your model, like my walker, for example, there, you do that after you've varnished it. So you varnish first, and then once that's fully dry, you put your static grass on. And again, another recommendation is make sure that the varnish is 100% dry, not half dry, you know, like for example, you might spray it and then a couple of hours later you can touch it and it feels fine. You put your static grass on, what can happen is the static grass will actually still stick to the model where the varnish isn't 100% dried. So really make sure that the varnish is 100% dried before you put your static grass on. There's other things to do after you've varnished as well, and that would be things like the gemstones, as I've already mentioned. So you spray your matte varnish first and then you do your gemstones afterwards. And the other effect is going to be blood effects, because the blood again is like quite a shiny finish. So you matte down your model and then you put your blood effects on. And that's what we are going to cover in the next Back to Basics video in a week's time. But for now, let's get this model varnished. Right, okay, so I've prepared the model for varnishing. Got this scrap piece of wood here. The model that was pinned, I've left the pin in and I've just blue tacked and sellotaped that onto the edge, and then I blue tacked the weapon options onto this piece as well. So I'm going to pop outside and spray it. I will video me doing it, but obviously I'm not going to be able to talk because I'll have the door shut so that spray doesn't go on my camera. I'm going to shake up the can, just like when we primed. I'm going to go in short, sharp bursts, so it will be rather than like holding it down. It's going to be like that sort of action. Not going to be too thick, just a few coats, and then when that fully dries, I will turn these over and I'll do the other side. Okay, so let's go in the garden and do this. Right, so there you go. So very easy, and this guy is now finished. Now normally you would probably have your marine already built, and all you'd have to do is maybe a bit of static grass, which is very easy, just a little bit of PVA glue, white glue, put it onto the base, sprinkle some static grass on, let it dry, turn it upside down, take the loose material off, and then you're done. As I said, the one reason why I haven't put my model onto the base is because I want to do some blood effects, and I don't want to mess that up by having the model in position, because I'm going to have his foot standing on the wolf, and I just want to make sure the blood effects go where I want them to go. So I'm going to do blood effects next, so watch out for that video. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. Hit that bell button so you can keep up to date with the wonders of Warhammer 40k. And I'll see you in the next video.